if we acknowledge our kids' experience with compassion, and I know you don't want to get ready for bed. It's hard when you have to stop one thing and do another, right? Acknowledge their experience. Compassion for it is some way to relate to the experience. I hate it when that happens. It happens to me too, is if we're honest with our kids and willing to be vulnerable and say, it's hard for me too, then we make ourselves human. Our kids are much more comfortable talking to us, and our kids are less likely to struggle with some of the perfectionism that so many of our kids deal with. If we try to make ourselves look perfect, then our kids think that they're supposed to be perfect.
ADHD Rewired, episode 79. This is the show designed to help those of us who have really good intentions and a slightly wandering attention. My name is Eric Tivers. I'm a licensed clinical social worker, coach, and consultant. We know that starting can be the hardest part, so let's get started. But first, let me thank our sponsors. Hello, ADHD Rewired listeners. If you've been listening for a while, you know about the ADHD Rewired coaching and accountability groups. We have a group starting in 2 weeks. First day is September 14th. If you are new to the podcast and to the community, I want to welcome you. So instead of me sitting here and telling you about all the features and perks of the ADHD Rewired Coaching and Accountability Group, I want to let Kamran share with you what these 10 weeks of the coaching program did for him.
For me, it's been really life-changing. The last 3 months, I was able to really break through this feeling of always feeling like I'm stuck or feeling like I'm unorganized, etc. This practice that we had of beginning with a mind map, that was such a wonderful experience of saying, what is, just lay out what's out there for the next 3 months, and then to be able to go back on a regular basis to that mind map and redo it and revise it and take out the things that I didn't want and add new ones. And the practice of weekly, setting an agenda for the week, the practice of keeping track of time, the practice of taking your to-do list and putting them in your calendar. It's given me a whole new dimension of not being stuck in that middle term area, that in the past it was like I was kind of blinded to it. And also, working with all of you guys in the same group and having the opportunity to hear others and see your way of going around, addressing these ADHD issues. That was also a wonderful experience for me too. I just want to thank you all for this terrific experience. Really appreciate it. For me, it's been really life-changing.
I want to thank again Kamran for letting me share this with you, so maybe you can get an idea of what it might be like for you if you were to join the next ADHD Rewired Coaching and Accountability Group. Right now, it is September 1st, 2015. The first day of this coaching group starts in 2 weeks. Don't wait. Go to coachingrewired.com. That's coachingrewired.com. You can learn more about the group there and schedule your free 20-minute consultation with me. But you do have to hurry. This group will fill up. Go to coachingrewired.com. And if you are one of the first 2 people to use the promo code Write It Down, you will get $100 off registration. Spelling does not count. Just mention the promo code when we talk or when you fill out the contact form on my website. Once again, go to coachingrewired.com. And don't forget, write it down. Welcome back to another episode of ADHD Rewired. I am here in the virtual ADHD Rewired studios in Northern Illinois with my guest. You may know her from ImpactADHD.com. Her name is Elaine Taylor Klaus. Elaine, how are you today?
I am great. Thanks for having me here.
You are welcome. And because I have unsuccessfully tried to introduce you, I'm just going to ask you to start off in telling us a little bit about yourself and what you do.
I would love to. I am the co-founder of a fabulous online resource for parents of kids with ADHD and related complex issues. We call them complex kids. It's called impactadhd.com. And we've been around for several years now, and we coach parents, and then we train them to use coaching skills to more effectively raise these complex kids, because we discovered it really worked. And it wasn't rocket science. It was something we could train other parents. So my business is to support parents through Impact ADHD, through coaching and training.
And you do have ADHD yourself?
I do. I have ADHD. I discovered it as an adult. And so I'm the mom in an ADD family of 5.
Wow. How many in your family?
All 5 of us.
Oh, man.
Have all been diagnosed at different times and places and stages.
Yeah. So what brought you to get that diagnosis yourself?
When I figured out my 3rd child was going to be diagnosed, he had not yet. He was too little, but I knew the signs by then because my older 2 and husband had been. And I sort of looked around and I went, okay, all of this neurology cannot be just coming from my husband. There was just no way he was responsible for all of it. So I figured I was actually trying to go back to graduate school. And so I decided to just have myself evaluated and see what there was to learn. I had suspected undiagnosed learning disabilities, which were also there. And so I was diagnosed, and all of a sudden everything made sense. Now I was about 40.
So let me ask you this. So, kind of setting aside for a moment that your business is in the work of ADHD, as an entrepreneur who, at least from my perspective, seems to be very successful in everything that you're doing. Tell me, what are some of the challenges that you kind of have worked through, are working through, and how have you worked around some of the challenges that you face because of your ADHD with everything you're doing?
It's interesting. I think that it's a lot easier now that I know what's going on. Mm-hmm. I think that the challenges were more in the early years when I wasn't living up to my own expectations, or I was sort of successful on the surface, but I felt like a fraud on the inside. All of those issues that so many of us adults with ADD deal with. Mm-hmm. And I didn't know why. Once I got diagnosed, it was like this light bulb shined, and I got really sad, and that I had to sort of process the years of sort of unfulfilled potential, if you will. And it's hard to say, because I was actually fairly successful even then, but I didn't feel it or own it. Mm. And then once I sort of got through that, I think once you know what you're dealing with, you can learn to manage it. And that's the work that you do, that I do. It's helping people understand it so that we can find the ways to manage it. And one of the greatest gifts I learned, I think the foundation of ADD coaching for adults, is to play to your strengths and outsource your challenges. Mm-hmm. And so as soon as I began to understand that there was a good reason why I was struggling with some of the things, that, there was a good reason I wasn't a very good bookkeeper, for example, or that I was having a hard time pulling the pieces together.
Go there for a minute. So what would happen when you were trying to do your own bookkeeping?
It took me 5 times longer than it took the bookkeeper I eventually hired. I'm not good at it. It's not my strength. And when I started freeing myself up to play to my strengths and really doing what I was good, finding my sweet spot, mm-hmm. and recognizing the things that weren't my gift and finding other ways to get them done, or people to get them done, or mm-hmm. whatever it was, everything shifted. Mm-hmm. And that's not to say that it's not a struggle, because we all have to do things we don't want to do.
Right.
But when it's not everything, when you find yourself in a job or a career, or as a stay-at-home mom, there's so much stuff that I had to do that was really, really not fun, not motivating, not compelling. It was hard to get myself to keep doing it. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Right. So
did you experience anxiety when having to do those kinds of, I call it the red zone tasks?
Yes.
And the stuff that's just such a challenge.
Well, in fact, and I think this is really common for adult women in particular with ADD, I was treated for anxiety for years. And at some point, I remember going into to my doctor and saying, what if I just try ADD meds? Let me just try them, just a little bit,
Yeah.
And I'm actually on the smallest dose you can imagine, but
of the ADHD med?
Of the ADD med. Mm-hmm. But it was like, oh, this is what it's like to be able to figure out what I'm supposed to do today. And when I was able to start focusing more effectively, the anxiety lifted. That and a lot of coaching. Coaching helped a great deal to relieve the anxiety. But I didn't really need the anxiety medication. I needed to be able to focus so I wouldn't be so anxious.
Makes perfect sense. Absolutely.
Yeah.
So we're going to talk a little bit about, because I know you have a launch coming up really soon about something that's kind of exciting that you guys are doing at impactadhd.com. But I want to get into some kind of other things first. So I was thinking back to the first time that you and I met, and it was at a CHAD conference.
That night.
Do you remember that evening?
I do. It was an ADA conference. Actually.
Oh, was it ADA? See,
Yep.
it all blurs together.
It was a rough night for me. That's why I remember it. I was not on my best behavior that night.
Now I'm also wondering, I wonder if you're thinking about the same night.
It's true.
So, we were having, I think there was like part of this conversation about, ADHD coaches versus, mental health professionals who do ADHD coaching as that's myself.
Yeah.
Right. And, and you I think you were, your opinion is very strong on, you need to be a trained coach. I don't think you've changed that. But my first impression of you, Elaine, was, wow, she has strong opinions, and I felt like I
told you it wasn't good.
Right. So, but then my second real impression of you was, you ran a CHAD town hall meeting. Mm-hmm. And you completely changed my my impression of you, because you were so good at running that meeting. You were able to and there was a lot of emotion.
Yes.
During this meeting. Yep. And I just I came away from that meeting of thinking, wow, you have a real talent with that, and wanting to know, how did you learn how to do that? Or is it something that you sort of naturally have, or a little bit of both? Because you just were really able to move the conversation forward, sticking with the agenda. And for someone with ADHD, I was just really impressed with your ability to do that.
Thank you.
So how did you learn to do that?
Part of it, I've done facilitating in some form or another, or teaching in some form or another most of my life. But I also think those are the skills I learned from coaching. Mm-hmm. And going back to that initial conversation, I do believe that coaching is a very particular skill set, and mm-hmm. it's very different from therapy. Mm-hmm. And so what we as coaches are trained to do is to hold a client's agenda, mm-hmm. and to keep focused and hyper focused, if you will, on that agenda, mm-hmm. And to not allow other things to divert you from the agenda, but to allow other things to play into it. So whatever comes up becomes something you use in service of the agenda instead of a distraction from it.
So would you be able to offer a kind of a concrete tip for all of us? And I'm certainly asking selfishly so I can use it myself. For when you're running a meeting, whether it's with a client, with a group, or just in a general meeting, when there's emotion involved, and also when there are other interesting topics of conversation that come up, what are some of the kind of one or two specific maybe tips that you can give that help move the agenda forward when there's a lot of kind of opportunities for it to go kind of be
diverted?
Yes.
Yeah. So I think the two things that come up to me, one is to always acknowledge what someone's saying and where they're coming from, is so that it doesn't matter how out of left field it may be, it's where they're coming from. Mm-hmm. So to acknowledge people and their participation and with respect and not with derision, mm-hmm. Not to say, how could you say this right now? We're talking about this and you're talking about that. But to say, wow, I get that that's really interesting for you. Right now we're talking about this. And then so the second point is to ask permission, to be able to say, would you mind if we hold that for now until we finish this, and then we'll see if we have time to come back to that. I think that you really need to ask people permission to contribute, to acknowledge what they've contributed to the conversation, and then ask their permission to hold off on what they're saying until you finish whatever you're addressing in the agenda. So then they feel heard, they feel acknowledged, they feel respected, and to let them know you may or may not be able to get back to it. But if they feel acknowledged, if they feel heard, they'll be willing to give you that permission.
I like that.
You.
I like that piece of letting them know that you may or may not, because I think part of that, some of the underlying beliefs that I think that a lot of us sometimes have is that we want to be everything to everybody, which we can't be, So yeah. I like how you kind of synthesize that down. So thank you for that.
And again, I think that's something else that we learn in coaching is to be very clear. This is what we're talking about, and this is what we're not talking about right now. And we can always say, is it time to bring that into this conversation? But we just want to be very transparent. And I think that's one of my favorite skills from coaching is to just be honest and clear and open. And when you bring transparency, people trust the process.
So how does that work so let's shift this a little bit to parenting. And so parenting with ADHD. So I'm a parent with ADHD.
Right.
And, so there's certainly areas of difficulty for me as a parent with ADHD. Like one of the things, so I have a kid who has a hard time transitioning. I have no idea where he gets it from.
Right, because it's so unusual for ADD kids.
And so there's these times where I really I would love nothing more than just to sit on the couch and just not do anything. But I know how important it is to help my son kind of move forward with going to do something. And so what do you do as a coach and helping parents with things like transitioning?
So do you want to talk about transitioning, or are we talking about how we as a coach help parents manage their own ADD around their kids? Because they're sort of two different topics.
Sure. And this is what you do so well. You're such a great clarifier. I love it.
But see, all I'm doing is getting really clear on what you're asking me, right? Because sometimes we ask questions and we're not really sure what we're asking.
Yeah, and I think that I do that sometimes, and I think it's great to hear that. Yeah.
Most of us try to figure out what we're saying while we're saying it. There are a lot of us that are verbal processors, especially.
Yes. I'm definitely a verbal processor.
Yeah.
So I guess what I'm saying is, how do you help parents who struggle with transitions when their kids are also struggling with something? So I guess it's zooming out a bit. How do you help parents who have the same issue their kid does?
Well, I think parents who have the same issue their kids do have an advantage because they can relate. And if they're willing to be, so the two things we were just talking about, we've talked about acknowledgement and transparency, right? And both of those come to play here. Because if we acknowledge our kids' experience with compassion, and I know you don't want to get ready for bed. It's hard when you have to stop one thing and do another, right? Acknowledge their experience. Compassion for it is, I hate it when I feel that way. And, I feel that way every time I have to drop you off at school and go to work, or, stop playing with you in the afternoon so I can make dinner, whatever it is, some way to relate to the experience. I hate it when that happens. It happens to me too. So now the kid, you're not different. And then the other piece, the transparency is if we're honest with our kids and willing to be vulnerable and say, it's hard for me too. I struggle with this too. Then we make ourselves human. Our kids are much more comfortable talking to us, and our kids are less likely to struggle with some of the perfectionism that so many of our kids deal with because they don't feel like, if we try to make ourselves look perfect, then our kids think that they're supposed to be perfect.
Perfectionism is a dirty word.
It's pernicious, right?
It's funny when I first started the podcast, I was doing all my own editing, and I've shared the story on the podcast before. But I would spend just an absurd amount of time editing things that nobody would ever even notice.
Yeah.
And I would even be aware that I'm like in hyper focused detail land and I'm telling myself, stop. And yet I keep going, it's that disconnect in ADHD. And so I began to outsource the post-production of my podcast, which was, best decision I think I've made in as far as business decisions go. just for my time. And so I recently did this presentation, and what I thought where I kind of, really, moved the bar forward on that perfectionism, it reared its head again, and it's like, oh man, it's so that perfectionism, I think as parents, I'm very mindful of with my own son, saying it's okay to mess up, encouraging that.
Important.
Oh my gosh.
Yes.
And so
the term we use is failing forward.
Yep.
So
I use the same thing. Yeah.
Parents to the value of failing forward. In my house, we have these two little ceramic jars, and one's a mistakes jar and the other says hugs and kisses. And they're next to each other on purpose because we're human and we make mistakes, right? And so sometimes you may have to put some money in the mistakes jar, but you're always going to match it with a hugs and kisses jar.
That's great. No, I love that. I love that.
Because, that's what it is. That's how we learn. That's how our brains process information. I always say we don't walk without crawling. We don't talk without babbling. How do we expect to be able to learn without making mistakes?
So let me ask you this. So now you present to schools?
Yeah.
Okay. And so I've been doing more presenting to schools, and, one of the things that I am really trying to help teachers understand and really have a sort of a mindset, almost public policy shift in a sense, is how do we get teachers to stop? Like if a kid fails a test, it's like, that should not be the end of that subject. Like, okay, let them retake the test, let them learn from those failures. And I feel in school, like, kids get branded as failures because it's like, fail, move on. It's not failure. Let's learn.
Well, and so part of it is understanding where's the failure taking place in the first place.
Mm-hmm.
Is it a failure with the kid's ability to learn the information, to retain the information, to regurgitate the information?
Mm-hmm.
Like, whereas oftentimes our kids, particularly the ADD kids, they know the material. They walk in, they go blank. It's like no memory retrieval. All of a sudden it's gone.
Mm-hmm.
And I used to watch this with my oldest child all the time. It was the saddest thing because she knew that material. She really did. So then it's about how do we test this kid to assess their knowledge. And so I think oftentimes we're not asking the right questions.
So what are some of the questions that you ask?
Well, it's that process. It's figuring out where in the process is this learning breaking down, because kids, they're so eager to please and they want to do it. And if they're not able to do it, there's something going on. I was just on a discussion online in Parenting 2.0 about this the other day, because it's all about
if people don't know what's Parenting 2.0.
So Parenting 2.0 is it's a LinkedIn group for it's progressive parenting professionals from all over the world. It's a really cool group. And yet sometimes I find even in that group that the discussion misses where there are children who aren't being identified, that have learning disabilities, that have ADHD, that have anxiety, where they're being missed because we're not asking the questions about where is the process breaking down,
Mm-hmm.
because kids want to please. And if they're not, and they're not able to produce, there's something going on.
Right. I mean, I always talk about look at babies who are and toddlers who are learning to walk. It's like they don't stop because they try to walk and they fall down. It's like they fail forward like 1,000+ times.
Right.
So I think it's
and when they do, we say, "Good, you can do it. You can do it." And then as they get older, it's almost like we no longer allow them we don't give them permission to make mistakes.
Right.
And then we wonder where the perfectionism comes from.
Well, and part of that, I think, too, is how we praise kids. It's like, nice job on that 100%. That's great.
Right.
It's like, which, when we understand how mindset really works, it's like when we understand that when we're praising the outcome and not the effort. So if you have a kid that's doing well on something, say, well, how do you, did you learn anything from that? Was maybe that was too easy, or, it's because otherwise it's just like, just focusing on process, I think is so important.
It is. And it's a hard one for parents to get because the school system doesn't work that way.
Right.
So even if parents are bringing that to the school system, they're getting pushback, mm-hmm. because it's really about, is there a 0 or 100 in that column? And, we're teaching to the test, and the structure is not conducive to focusing on the process. So where I like to encourage parents, particularly parents of kids who are in middle school and younger, those are the years where we really allow these kids to focus on process and not worry as much about what they're retaining in terms of content.
Mm-hmm.
Because if they can get those skills in place before they hit high school, half of school is sort of self-management and organization.
Yeah.
And it's process.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And so it's critically important, and yet it is sort of missed, and it's not even evaluated, much less rewarded.
And I don't remember who it was. I think it was at a social thinking conference. They talked about executive functioning. Maybe it was Sarah Ward. I think he's going to be presenting at the CHAD conference.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it was her that said that, part of school success is the ability to master the boring.
Yes, it's so true, which is not our forte.
I know. It's like, it's true. And it's so sad. It's like, why? Yeah. Like, learning should be exciting. Learning should be interesting. Why does it have to be boring?
If not to master the boring, to find a way to make it interesting.
Right. Yeah. Because, our kids are in school and they're having to survive through it instead of thrive in it. Yeah. So we're going to talk about kind of survival going back to school. But before we do, we're going to just take a real quick break to thank our sponsor, and I'll be right back. Learn, grow, and connect. Improve your time management, planning skills, and overall productivity. Chart your course and get support along the way. ADHD Rewired coaching and accountability groups have been providing people just like you a safe and supportive space to achieve your goals, both big and small. From setting and reviewing weekly goals to our adult study hall, when you get those important tasks done, those tasks that are boring and important, we mute our mics with video feeds on and we get to work. Join us for the next ADHD Rewired coaching and accountability group today. Don't wait until the last minute. Don't wait for prices to go up. Don't wait until this group fills up. Go to coachingrewired.com. That's coachingrewired.com and schedule your free 20-minute screening call with me today. That's coachingrewired.com. Fall 2015 session begins September 14th, and it's already filling up. Once again, that's coachingrewired.com. And prepare to get your ADHD Rewired. Support for this podcast comes from Audible. For a free audiobook download, go to erictivers.com/audible for a link for that free download and for some hand-picked recommendations. Go to erictivers.com/audible for your free audiobook download. All right, we are back with Elaine Taylor-Klaus from impactadhd.com. So Elaine, we're going to talk about this program you have coming up that you're doing about surviving school. Tell me, I'm not going to even pretend to set it up properly. So just tell us about it.
It's called Back to School Survival Live. And it's an event, we do it every year at this time of year. We do it, usually we do a webinar to sort of get parents and professionals back in gear for school. But this year we're doing it differently because we're doing a live stream, a 2-hour live stream event. So we'll be taking questions and teaching and talking, and we'll have a live audience, and it's going to be very different.
Have you done this yet?
Never.
Okay. Nope. So you may be failing forward, or you may be doing something.
I'm hoping to thrive through it.
I love that, like that excitement though. I love that excitement and that like anxiety. Like it's like the positive anxiety of like trying something new that's like on stage in a sense. Yes. It's
very different for us. But Diane and I, we have a great banter with each other. We co-lead beautifully with each other because sort of I'm the ADD one and she's the non-ADD one, and I'm a little out there and she's a little linear, and so we balance each other quite nicely. And I think I love this work, and I love the opportunity to teach parents and invite parents to become part of the community that we're creating. And What we know is about half of our parents have ADD and about half don't, and when you bring them together and they educate each other, and like you do in your groups, when they inform each other, they empower each other, the results are just extraordinary.
Mm-hmm.
So it's exciting to do, but this one's going to be a little, it's different. It's a new thing. Content is not new, but
So what are some of the things that as far as content goes, maybe you can share one or two things that
we'll be talking about what are the most important tips for parents in terms of what are the most important coaching techniques or strategies that they can use to set themselves up for a positive school year. And so some of that is focusing on themselves. And we really like to distinguish between what we do for our kids and what we do for ourselves, because so often as parents, if we really take a little more time to pay attention to ourselves and our approach and how we're handling things with our kids, mm-hmm. what we call the coach approach, we get better results with our kids. And it's really not about fixing our kids. It's about understanding them well enough and managing ourselves well enough to teach them to manage themselves. That's the goal here. That's what it's all about. And so we'll talk about a couple of different strategies for that. We will definitely be talking about setting realistic expectations and how you do that as a parent and how you set realistic expectations for yourself as well as for your kids.
So, and how long have you been doing these kind of?
I think this is our third year doing. Okay. The program is in its fifth year. We've been running this group for now coming up on 5 years.
Wow. Congratulations on that. That's awesome.
I know, it's pretty cool. Or something like that. But I think we're stepping into our fifth year. So we run it, but how we introduce it is changing every year.
So let me ask you this. So you've been doing these groups along with it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I would imagine that there's been a lot of just insights and things that have probably been reinforced as like an unexpected aha for you. Is there
from
something
running the groups?
Yeah. What are some of the things that you have really learned from the people that have been involved in your group? What have you learned from them?
I think the biggest thing what's coming to me right away is how little some of the ahas are that make the biggest difference, right? Sometimes, you can hear something and again and again and again, and then at some point you get it and you kind of go, oh. Yeah, now I get it. And for so many of these parents, it's not like we're the first book they've read or training they've done, or, they've been doing this for a while. Some of them are brand new, but oftentimes we get people who've been doing this for years and they're still not feeling successful at helping their kids manage.
Mm-hmm.
And when they get this one glimmer where they realize, for example, I'm the one setting the tone in the home. And if I shift that, everything changes. Or, I need to take care of myself because if I burn out, I'm not good for anyone. It's little things, but when they have this one aha and you can sort of see their whole world shift from this one thing, and it's something that's usually not monumental. It's usually pretty fundamental, but they just are able to see it in a new way. And that's what coaching offers, that ability to try on different perspectives till you find one that makes sense for you. And it's just amazing. I cannot tell you, I don't think I've ever gotten off one of those calls where I haven't said out loud to the room or to Diane or my husband, I love this work because it makes such a difference in people's lives. It's just so profoundly transformative.
Mm-hmm.
And yet it's so simple.
Mm. Yeah, I can echo that as well.
Yeah,
I mean, with my coaching group, I mean, it's what it seems like each group that I have done, and they've all been, it's just the group themselves are always different because the people that are in the group, are different. But the thing that has really consistently has been reinforced over each group is that productivity. I do these productivity groups. That productivity. For people with ADHD is so much more than about productivity. I mean,
Yes.
it's so much more. It's emotional. It's about self-worth, and there's so much shame that's oh my
I was going to say,
gosh.
for adults, it's all the shame and blame games, and we have so much garbage that we have to unload. You know, when I first started coaching, and I was working mostly with adults around their own issues, I would always start off with putting the stick down, you know, because when you're an adult with ADD, you've been hitting yourself over the head with a stick. It's in some form or another your whole life. And so first thing you got to do is put it down, right?
Yeah.
And because nothing else is going to work until you stop hitting yourself over the head.
Yeah.
Right?
Last week we had someone in my group that, cause I always ask people that at the end of the week, you know, what were like lessons learned, from the week. And one of the things that this person said was, you know, she learned that it's okay to say no and it's okay to let go. And I was like, oh, she hit it right on the head right there. Yeah.
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 We do something at the end of every single call. We have a final 4, and there are 4 questions we ask at the end of every call so that they can capture their aha for the call, right? And leave with a commitment to action. Because that coaching, we're always trying to deepen the learning and forward the action. And so,
what's like one or two of those questions?
Well, one of them is, you know, so the 4 questions are, what did we focus on today? So what did you focus on? Because I know we may have been talking about transparency, but what were you paying attention to in the call today? What was important about it to you? So that's first. And then the second is about, you know, what's your takeaway? What's your gem, or what are your gems for today? And then the third is, what action do you want to commit to? And the fourth is, what do you want to do to set yourself up for success? And I think that's a really key piece, because if I commit to, I'm going to have a conversation with my husband about how we work with the kids around this issue, then how am I going to make that successful? Well, I'm going to do it after we've had dinner when the kids are in bed over a glass of wine, or I'm going to go out with him and we're going to, you know, like, what am I going to do to make it possible, instead of just saying I'm going to do it and really then feeling like
focus on the behavioral implementation.
Exactly.
That's correct. That's some high value stuff right there. Thanks for sharing that.
Really good.
Yeah. So is there a cap on how many people can sign up for the live stream that you're doing?
Nope.
No,
we don't think so.
and I'll ask you right before I let you go.
It's all internet based.
Yeah, I'll ask you again before I let you go. But just in case, you know, any of my listeners have a shorter attention span, I want to tune out soon. How can people sign up for it?
Probably at this point, we don't even have the links for it yet.
Okay.
It's called Your Back to School Survival Live. But if they go to our website, to impactadhd.com, and download the ebook or sign up for the newsletter, then they'll get on the list to get information about it.
Okay.
We have a great ebook called ADHD in Reality, Practical Tips for Parents from Parents. So it's a great resource. And once you get that, you'll get information.
And all the links will, as always, are on the show notes for every episode. So,
great.
Before we kind of wrap up here, because I am trying to be mindful of time. I always try to. I'm not always successful with it, but I really try. I'm seeing that the right on my time timer is getting close to a sliver.
Got it.
So the last part of our show, Elaine, is called the random question round. This is the part of the show that has nothing to do with ADHD, which then paradoxically has everything to do with ADHD.
Right.
Are you ready?
Yes.
Share with us an invention or an improvement on like a product or something out there that you think could change the world or at least change lives.
Something that has been invented or has not been invented?
It could be something completely new or an improvement on something that's already invented.
So my mind is going to technology because, as you know, my business is a technology-based business, and it stresses me out because I'm not very good at it. I would like to make it easier to remind myself about something that I need to do when I need to do it without having to type it into a phone or a computer.
Have you heard of this thing called Siri?
Yeah, she doesn't like my voice, and Siri and I have a touchy relationship. We don't. She doesn't. I don't know whether I don't articulate well or it's the the tone of my voice. I'm not sure, but I haven't quite mastered that. And so maybe the invention is, how do I learn all of this without having to take the time to learn all of this?
Here's a quick tip for if you're an iPhone user. Just push that button that prompts Siri and ask her, what can you do? And it will give you a whole menu of all these different questions you can ask and ways to navigate the iPhone through voice. Fascinating.
All right, that's good to know. Yeah.
Okay, so all right, now the way my thought process is on my following questions is I think about parts of our conversation and then I try to kind of make a tangential question related to it.
Good, yeah, because I don't think I did such a great job with that last one.
No, it was good. It was put down the stick.
I got it. Yeah.
All right.
I feel like I'm on wait, don't tell me though. You know.
I should bring something of that in. Okay, so I'm trying to channel what's his name, Michael. What?
Rizdal or
yeah, something like that. Yeah. Maybe we can, as a prize, we can lead my voice on somebody's home answering machine or something. All right. Next question is, oh man, I'm totally blanking right now, and nothing's popping in my head. If you had 3 sticks, tell me 3 things that you could do with them.
3 sticks. So I am going to fires and s'mores. And depends on how long they are, I guess, and what level of green they are. But I think that I could probably make a fire and roast marshmallows with 3 sticks.
Nice. Okay.
Yeah, that would be good.
How do you like your marshmallow?
Brown. All
so
the way around.
Burnt.
No black. No, I don't like it burnt, but you got to take the time to slowly cook it all the way. My kids know exactly how to make it for me, and they are so happy when they make me a perfect marshmallow. It's all good.
That's how I used to like my marshmallows. But I learned, so I do that where it's nice and melty in the middle, but then at the very last moment, and it's a fine balance, because if you do it too long, it'll fall off the stick, right?
Yes.
So it's finding that happy medium, but then I let it ignite, and I blow it out, and then just immediately after blowing it out, I just put the whole thing in my mouth. So you have that warm meltiness with crunchiness from the char. Oh, it's so good.
I like the crunchy from the brown. You pull it off, and then you can keep roasting the inside, and you can eat the outside.
Oh, haven't thought about that.
Yeah, that way you get multiple marshmallows in one, and it sort of reduces the caloric intake at the same time. Okay,
I don't know why I am blanking on my random questions. Usually I can come up with them. My last random question is, what is a random question that you want to ask me?
I was thinking when you were saying that you do random questions, I'm like, my mind would go blank. How do you do that?
Well, it's and part of why I do this is just to show thinking processes on the spot, and then it's okay that we go blank. It's because it happens. Okay.
So what's the one book that you read in your sort of high school, college, formative sort of intellectual years that you want to make sure that your kids read when they're older?
That is a killer question. Wow. My high school. High school, nothing comes to mind.
College, really.
Okay. That is such a good question. Either Emotional Intelligence by Daniel Goldman.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. Oh man, that's I think that might be, I'm thinking about college, and I think that would be the book that I would, because I think that, I'm sure it's been updated and will be updated again by the time, my son's old enough to read that.
Right.
I love the question. Like, I have so many books that are like popping into my mind right now.
Right.
It's.
Yeah. I was like, I had 2, now I have 3. Like, it's very hard to limit.
Yeah. What about you?
Illusions by Richard Bach.
Okay.
Prophet by Khalil Gibran, and The Tao of Pooh. Those are my 3 biggies. You
ever read, I was thinking of another book I read in college that was sort of informative at the time. I wonder if I would think as highly of it now. The Celestine Prophecy?
Yeah. God, that was long. Yeah.
Yeah, I remember like thinking like, wow, this is like, as a liberal arts student, it's like, this is different, it's...
Yeah, this is deep. Yeah. Well, and I just want my kids to see that this sort of Western world that we live in is not, there's not one way of looking at the world. And I think my kids have seen that we've really been very open to, there's lots of different ways to looking at everything.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
But I think, if you haven't read The Tao of Pooh, it should be fundamental reading for everyone.
Yeah, no, I have not read that. Do you think it's on Audible?
Yeah.
That's awesome, because my listeners know they can get a free download.
Simple. It's sort of like, it's a very, very simple book, but it's using literally the wisdom of Winnie the Pooh. Like, they pull excerpts from Pooh and Piglet and to sort of expound on a simple but profound philosophy of life. It's really great.
I think I'm going to have to add that to my list of things to check out. So thank you for that.
And very accessible.
Yeah.
It's not.
Is it a short one?
Yeah.
Great. Well, everyone knows that listens to the podcast that if they have not done so already, they can get a free audiobook download by going to ADHD. Let me try that one more time. They can go to audibletrial.com/ADHD rewired. We get a free audiobook download there.
Great.
So I think that's all I have to ask you about. This has been really fun. Let people know one more time where they can reach you.
So we are at impactadhd.com. And there is, as I said, there's a free ebook there. We have a phenomenal newsletter because it's really short and sweet. And we would love to support parents of any kind of complex kids, whether your kids have ADD or anxiety or learning disabilities or whatever. We hear from parents a lot. My kid doesn't have ADD, but I use your site all the time. So if you are trying to be a conscious parent, then we are a great place for you to visit. ImpactADHD.com. And thank you, Eric, for having me and for giving me this opportunity to share with your audience. I really appreciate it.
Well, you're doing great work and you're helping a lot of people. So thank you.
It's been a pleasure.
Thank you for listening to another episode of ADHD Rewired. And if you're new to the show, welcome to ADHD Rewired. We are more than just a podcast. We are a community focused on learning, growing, and connection. You can see a full outline of this and all other episodes with all the links and other resources mentioned during this interview at ADHDrewired.com. Help support this podcast by checking out my sponsors. I use Zoom video conferencing nearly every day, and so can you. Go free or go pro. But please go to erictibbers.com/Zoom so they know that I sent you. And you can get a free audiobook from Audible at erictibbers.com/Audible. And next time you shop Amazon, use the Amazon search portal at ADHDrewired.com. A small percentage of your purchase will go to support this show, and it doesn't cost you anything extra. You can also support this podcast by leaving an honest rating and review in iTunes or Stitcher. This really helps other people find this show. And don't forget to hit subscribe so you never miss an episode. Don't just be a passive listener, be an active member of the ADHD Rewired community. We are on Facebook. You can like our page, but please submit your request to join our free and growing community. And don't forget to check your other inbox because I screen everybody before they come into our community. Looking for a coach? If you're still listening at this point and you answered yes, come to my website at ADHDrewired.com and schedule your free 20-minute consultation, or call me at 224-993-9450. Is your school, business, or organization hiring speakers? I provide fun and engaging presentations full of practical solutions that both educate and entertain. Hire me for your next professional development day or corporate training event. Go to ADHDrewired.com/talks. Thanks for listening. I'll catch you next week.